All right, so we've got horses, right? Absolutely amazing creatures. We ride them, they pull our stuff, and they've even been in movies. And then we've got zebras, basically a horse that went through a printer with low ink. They look similar to horses because they technically are horses, so why on earth did we only saddle up one of them? Why aren't we riding these stripy steeds into the sunset? I mean, think about it. Humans are pretty goddamn stubborn when we want something. For crying out loud, we've turned wolves into pugs. We've tried to domesticate just about everything. So what happened to zebras? Well, for centuries, people have definitely tried to domesticate zebras. Dutch farmers, British colonists, and showmen have all given it their best shot. People looked at this stripy package and thought, yeah, I can work with that. And for centuries, the zebra looked back and said, in the most dramatic way possible, fuck you. Now, these attempts at domestication didn't fail because zebras are jerks. It's way more interesting than that. It's a story of evolution. It's a story of an animal that faced the full force of human stubbornness and actually won. But before we jump into that, I need to clear something up first. I need you to know that taming and domestication are not the same thing. You can tame a lion, but you will never ever have a domesticated lion species you can breed to be docile house cats. Taming is about training one individual animal. Domestication is about changing an entire species over generations through selective breeding. For an animal to be a good candidate for domestication, it needs to tick a lot of boxes. It should be able to breed in captivity, not be a super picky eater, grow up reasonably fast, and have a manageable personality. What I mean by that last one is that it needs to be calm enough that it doesn't freak out and try to redecorate the barn with you as the centerpiece every single time a leaf blows by. Now, with that out of the way, this is where the zebra steps in to throw a wrench in the whole domestication plan. It's not just that zebras have a bit of an attitude, it's that they would rather die than to be captured. And believe it or not, scientists actually have a term for it. It's called capture myopathy. Sounds fancy, but it's basically a lethal dose of stress. When certain prey animals, like zebras, are caught or feel threatened, their bodies don't just get a little adrenaline rush. Their system goes into a full-on meltdown. Their muscles begin to break down. Their body temperature skyrockets, and their organs fail. It's a fatal physiological peace out button that has been hardwired into their very being. You see, zebras evolved on the African savanna alongside lions, hyenas, and cheetahs. Those are some of the most persistent and dangerous predators on the planet, so to have this kill switch wasn't really a bug, it was more so of a feature, because if you were caught, you were likely dead anyway. Now, I'm not saying that the ancestors of horses in Europe and Asia didn't face predators too. They did, but they also had periods of lower pressure, periods in which they could relax for an extended amount of time. Zebras, on the other hand, never got that break. Every other generation of zebra was honed and built by relentless danger. This forged an animal that is not just skittish, but hypervigilant, incredibly reactive, and aggressively defensive. This means that the zebras who were the most paranoid, the most explosive, and the most likely to deliver a bone-crushing kick were the ones that lived to see another day and pass on their genes. We are literally trying to breed for something that evolution has spent thousands of years ruthlessly weeding out one by one. Now imagine trying to domesticate that. You're not just trying to calm down a skittish animal, you're fighting against thousands of years of evolutionary programming that says, if a large mammal, like a human, restrains you, you should off yourself. This is a way bigger deal than just being bitey or stubborn. It's a biological dead end for domestication. Now, of course, people still tried. They really did. One example is Walter Rothschild in the early 1900s, who trained a team of zebras to pull a carriage through London just to prove he could, and he did, for a little while. But these were always one-off cases of taming individual animals with immense patience and probably a good insurance policy. Another example comes from the colonial settlers in Africa who thought zebras would be perfect because they were resistant to local diseases that killed imported horses. But every time the reports were the same. The animals were unpredictable, aggressive, and impossible to manage as a reliable group. Their training didn't stick from one generation to the next. You had to start the training all over again with each baby zebra that was born, because that fight-or-flight panic response was baked into their DNA. Now, the most famous failed example, because it's just too good not to include, was of course from the US government. In the early 1900s, the United States government got a wild idea when President Theodore Roosevelt was gifted a male gravy zebra from Abyssinia named Dan. Officials saw Dan and dreamed of a new, disease-resistant work animal. They started a full-on government breeding program, and as you could probably guess, it was a disaster. Dan was described as unruly and had a positive aversion to the horse mares they brought to him. He even tried to kill one. They eventually bred him with donkeys, but the resulting hybrids were infertile and just as unwilling to work, and after years of wasted effort and money, the program was eventually shut down. And if you're wondering where is Dan now, his skeleton is now in the Smithsonian.
Now you might be thinking, okay, but horses had predators too, so what gives? Well, it comes down to a bit of evolutionary luck. The ancestors of modern horses in the Eurasian steppes faced predation, but at some point, and as I said before, they had periods in which they could rest. This created a window where being a little less reactive wasn't a death sentence. Horses that could tolerate a bit more ambiguity had a chance to survive and pass on those slightly calmer genes. This opened the door for humans to step in and start selectively breeding for even more tameness. Now this is where genetics really screwed the zebra, or in this case, saved it, depending on your perspective. At around 4,200 years ago, a random lucky mutation popped up in some horses in a gene called GSDMC. In horses, this mutation reshaped their backbones, making them better at carrying weight and improving their coordination. It literally made them more rideable in a sense. Another mutation in a gene linked to anxiety also appeared, making some horses just a bit calmer and more tolerant of human nonsense. And ancient humans, whether they knew it or not, selectively bred the horses that carried these traits. So what ended up happening is that over thousands of years, we slowly reshaped their very nature to be compatible with ours. Zebras never got those tickets in the genetic lottery. They were stuck on the evolutionary path where being a paranoid, bitey wreck was the winning survival strategy. Their backs also didn't evolve to comfortably support a human rider or a heavy load. Even the social structure of zebras works against us. Horses often form clear herds with a lead mare or stallion that humans can kind of mimic to gain control. Zebra herds, on the other hand, are much more fluid and democratic. There's no clear boss to replace. You can't be the leader of a committee where every member is a highly strung ninja with a bad attitude. So, in the end, it wasn't a lack of human effort or ingenuity. It was a fundamental mismatch. Zebras are evolutionary masterpieces of survival in one of the world's most predator-dense environments. Every quirk in a zebra that we find difficult to manage, whether it be their aggression, their skittishness, their defensiveness, or their inability to just not die when being captured, is a medal they earned for not ending up as a lion's lunch. Domestication requires a certain flexibility, a biological willingness to accept a new, or in this case, weird partner. The zebra's recipe for survival was too perfect, too specialized to allow for that kind of change or acceptance. And it's actually kind of beautiful when you think about it, because in a world where humans have reshaped so much of nature to suit us and our needs, the zebra, with its stripes and untameable spirit, remains a glorious reminder that some things just won't be saddled. They stayed true to themselves. And honestly, you gotta respect the hustle.